Hello Internet, I'm Hollywood's premier script doctor, and I'm here to fix Hollywood's screw-ups one movie at a time. You're welcome. And what movie am I saving this month?
It's sort of a sequel to Snow White.
Oh, brilliant. I love Snow White. Never knew that it actually got a sequel. Who made it?
It's from the same people that made He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
That's kind of odd that they went and did a Snow White sequel, but I enjoyed He-Man, so I'm excited.
Prepare for disappointment.
What? Why?
You didn't see the review we did of the movie on this channel, did you?
No. Why?
Even direct-to-video Disney sequels put it to shame.
Oh, it can't possibly be that bad. Nothing could be that bad.
Aren't you gonna finish the video?
Do I have to?
I had to review it.
Alright, fine. Hello Internet, I'm Hollywood's premier script doctor, and I'm here to fix up Hollywood's screw-ups one movie at a time, and boy did they screw up this film!
First off, if you're not interested in the background of this film, or why we're making this video, and you're just here for the rewrite, then skip to this time signature. So Happily Ever After is a sequel to Snow White in name only, mainly because the filmmakers would have had the pantsuit off them if it were anything else. And not only was the film received poorly as a film, as we covered in depth in our full review of it, link in the description, but it was also receiving very little financial success, despite a pretty hefty marketing budget. In fact, it ended up destroying the film's creators, Filmation, and their distributors, First National Film Corporation. So yeah, it was a pretty bad movie. I mean, like, a really bad movie. So how do you fix something like that up? And why should we?
I mean, how many of you have actually seen Happily Ever After? What's that? None of you? I thought not. So instead of wasting all of our time, I think I'll just...
You're not getting out of this. Just do the video.
Fine, fine. Well, here's why.
Because I believe that despite the film's near lack of any following today, I believe that if it had been handled correctly, it could not have only saved the film's creators and their distributors, but it could also have been a very strong fantasy adventure film. And today, I'm going to show you how. This is Happily Ever After, Hollywood's fixer-upper style. But before we get into how I would fix the film, it's probably important to talk about what we actually got. The original film starts shortly after the end of Snow White. The queen is dead, the kingdom is at peace, as Snow White and the prince prepare to marry. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the Rapping Owl and Batso are celebrating their freedom by throwing a party for themselves before the queen's equally evil wizard brother, Lord Maliss, shows up looking for his sister. And after learning about her death, he vows to avenge her. He transforms into a dragon and takes control of the palace, while the Rapping Owl teaches Batso how to be evil. It doesn't end well. Okay, maybe it did end well. That was like the best part of this entire movie. But anyway, Lord Maliss attacks Snow White and the prince. Snow White manages to escape, but the prince is captured. Snow White reaches a cottage and meets up with the dwarf's female cousins, the 7 dwarf elves, Muddy, Sunburn, Blossom, Marina, Critterina, Moonbeam, and Thunderella. The dwarves have been removed from this film because their characters got hit with 3 copyright strikes. I mean, because they bought another mine in a different kingdom. The dwarf elves take Snow White to visit Mother Nature at Rainbow Falls. Why? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But as it turns out, Mother Nature has given the dwarf elves individual powers to assist her, but not all of them have mastered their powers. Looking at you, Thunderella. Meanwhile, Lord Maliss attacks them, but is stopped by Mother Nature. Before leaving, Lord Maliss informs Snow White that the prince is held captive in his castle in the Land of Doom.
Wait, stop. That word's dangerous. You really don't want to say that word.
What? Doom?
Yes, that.
Why not?
According to movie critic legends, if you say that word 7 times, the ghost of the horror genre appears and turns your life into a horror film.
And you believe them? You're always good for a laugh.
Anyway, Mother Nature tells them that in order to get to the Land of Doom, they have to follow several very specific steps.
Follow the path past the 7 pines and over the 7 peaks. The path leads through a cave and into the realm of doom.
Snow White and the dwarf elves teleport past the 7 pines and peaks and go through the cave.
Oh, so that's why they needed to go see Mother Nature. So that she could tell them to... Walk through a cave. Right.
Anyway, they also encounter a strange shadow man who stalks them throughout the film. Moving along, Maliss sends his wolves after the group, and they manage to escape with help from the shadow man / stalker. But it is to no avail, as Maliss captures Snow White anyway and takes her to the castle. In the castle, Snow White is reunited with her prince, who is obviously Maliss in disguise. He leads her to the roof and tries to turn her to stone with his magic cape. The stalker attacks, but is quickly issued a restraining order by Maliss and keels over in shock. Yeah, who knew stalking had consequences? Alright. That never happened. But it should have! What I meant to say is that it was a curb stomp of a battle that's over in less time than it took you to realize that Gaston was just a wee bit egotistical. The dwarf elves arrive, but after taking one look at Maliss, they all begin to panic! Forgetting, of course, that they have actual powers. No, I'm not talking about the powers that Mother Nature gave them. I'm talking about the powers that evolution gave them. You have legs! Run! The only one who isn't turned to stone is Thunderella, and eventually she comes to her senses long enough to zap Maliss with her thunder powers. Snow White then throws the cape on him and he turns to stone. The dwarf elves somehow return to normal because we are definitely not ripping off Disney, and Snow White mourns the Shadow Man / stalker. Mother Nature pops up smiling and reveals that the Shadow Man was actually the prince all along, and he gets turned back to normal. Then Mother Nature lets the dwarf elves keep their powers and attend Snow White's wedding. They take away the rapping owl's cigar, and his cancer-ridden lungs are somehow immediately purified with no consequences whatsoever. So remember kids, smoking won't hurt you as long as you quit the moment before you die. Snow White and the prince kiss, and they live happily ever after. So as you can imagine, there's a lot wrong with this film. But I think it actually goes a little bit further back in the production cycle than that. I believe that actually trying to do a Snow White sequel without actually having the rights to the characters was their first misstep. Not only because of the financial difficulties that it put on the studio, but because it kind of limited them in terms of what kind of story they could tell. Snow White is a pretty simple story, and she's not exactly the most engaging lead. And, I mean, there's nothing wrong with telling a simple story, but with those two factors, it's difficult to make a good sequel. Where else can you really go with a character like Snow White as your lead? There's just not really enough meat to the story, and that leads you to having a lot of fluff. Scowl and Batso are great examples of that. They're characters that get quite a bit of screen time, but they contribute almost nothing to the plot. So you might be asking yourself, what exactly went right with this film? Well, similar to the original Snow White film, the thing that was most memorable about this movie is the dwarves, or, well, in this case, the dwarf elves. However, they weren't able to actually fully take advantage of them in the Filmation version because they were stuck in the mindset of having a Snow White sequel. So this is going to be a little bit different than some of our other fixer-upper videos, because since one of the big fallouts from this film was quite literally the bankruptcy of 2 companies, I think taking into account how to make a film that would actually save those companies, or at least keep them afloat, is something we need to consider. And part of the way we do that is to break away from this need to have a Snow White sequel. As I stated before, this should be a fun fantasy adventure film, filled with colorful characters, a coherent storyline, and a happy ending. And this is the reason why I am going to explicitly ignore the fact that this was originally a Snow White ripoff and instead take from the potentially good ideas, like the dwarf elves and their powers, that the film might have had, and bring them back to the forefront in its own unique story. So with that in mind, here's how I would have made Happily Ever After. We open on the dwarf elves and Mother Nature, showing that the land is in pristine condition and everyone's happy. We see a red dragon fly over the forest, but are unsure of the reason for it. The camera follows the dragon as he swoops down on the princess's wedding and kidnaps the prince. We cut back to Mother Nature and they discuss this theory that Lord Maliss is once again up to no good, and she sends the dwarf elves to find out what exactly happened. However, in the time that elapsed between when the dwarf elves left and came back, Mother Nature has fallen ill. We learn that her illness is being caused by Lord Maliss. You see, because she's Mother Nature, it only makes sense to me that she would suffer as the land suffers. And we saw in the film, everything in the Land of Doom is basically, well, dead. So I imagine that as Lord Maliss's powers increase, he gains more influence and the land gets worse. And vice versa with Mother Nature, which is why the land was in such pristine condition at the very start of the film. So now the princess is introduced to the dwarf elves, and one thing that the dwarf elves didn't really have in the original cut of the movie is a good dynamic between them, and that's something I'm going to try and add here. So, we're going to have Muddy as the muscle, and her powers are obviously super strength, though she does tend to run into things before thinking them through, as a lot of these kind of characters do. Sunburn as the pyro, obviously due to her powers over fire, and as you can imagine, she's got a bit of a temper. Blossom as the caring medic due to her healing powers, she's perhaps the closest to Mother Nature. Critterina will be the negotiator or the ranger due to her ability to communicate with and persuade animals. Although one drawback to the powers is she sees animals more in the way that we would see strangers on the street. Yeah, there's a very, very, very slim chance that they might be dangerous under the wrong circumstances, but we don't really think about it that much. And neither does she. Marina will be the marksman with a harpoon gun and a wannabe leader with a bit of a tragic past. She's also shown to have very good hearing powers when she picks up on a conversation from many feet away. And Moonbeam as a seemingly incompetent narcoleptic who, well...
Moonbeam's in charge of the night. She's not herself during the day.
Yeah, let's go with that. As far as Thunderella goes, she was the only dwarf elf that really had any sort of an arc in the film, and I'd like to keep that intact. However, her arc doesn't really seem as satisfying as it could have been, and I think that's mainly because not a whole lot happened to change her outlook. And so when she actually overcame the obstacles she was facing, such as it is, I felt like it was more because the plot demanded it than it was because of actual character growth. But ironically, I'm going to keep that exactly the way it was, and you'll see why later in the video. It would be easy, of course, just to rewrite the character arc, but this show is Hollywood fixer-uppers, and we do our darndest to fix up what we were given. Now getting back to the plot, after getting those extremely specific directions from Mother Nature...
Follow the path past the 7 pines and over the 7 peaks. The path leads through a cave and into the realm of doom.
Yeah, those. The dwarf elves and the princess decide to go to the land of doom in order to save the prince and Mother Nature. At the 7 pines, plants attack our heroes and Sunburn gets smacked on her butt. Marina tells Sunburn, "Don't freak out," but Sunburn ignores her and starts setting the vines on fire. However, she set way more on fire than she intended to, and that includes a troll's home. The troll comes out and raises his club, bellowing angrily. Marina is freaking out, both due to the situation and the fact that she can sense she's not really in control of this group. And then Critterina, as stone-faced as you can ever see, looks the troll dead in the eyes and calmly asks, "You mad, bro?" Blossom facepalms and the others are shaking. Critterina, of course, does not realize this. Marina is giving out orders, but nobody's listening, and when she reaches Thunderella, she kinda just gives out an annoyed sigh, illustrating how the group feels about Thunderella and her not using her powers. All this, of course, leads up to the troll attacking and eventually injuring a sleepwalking Moonbeam. And after our heroes are no longer in danger, while Blossom heals Moonbeam in the background, Sunburn confronts Critterina, saying that if she had just taken the situation more seriously and calmed the troll down immediately, Moonbeam wouldn't have gotten hurt. Sunburn is especially mad because Moonbeam can't really defend herself during the day. Critterina knows that they are right, but she's defensive and can't quite admit it out loud yet. So she says that she did calm the troll down. And she did, eventually. She also adds that if Sunburn had just controlled her own powers better in the first place, it never would have happened. Thunderella attempts to play peacemaker, but both Sunburn and Critterina yell at her because she did nothing. In response, she sort of stammers, but my powers are scary, and backs down. And I know that's a little different than in the film, but again, the spirit of the arc is being kept. Then an avalanche occurs while passing through the 7 peaks, and it's about to bury everyone. Without pausing to think, Muddy rushes forward, leaving everybody behind so that she can stop the rocks all by herself. Marina again shouts for her to stop, but again, nobody listens, and Muddy is buried under the landslide, which luckily comes to a halt right before burying everyone else. The 7 dwarf elves dig Muddy out, and Marina starts lecturing her on the importance of following orders so she doesn't get buried under rocks. Muddy yells at Marina for bossing her and everyone else around and being too controlling. This is sort of a reactionary response Muddy has when she knows that Marina was right, but yet can't take the hit to her pride by admitting it. Thunderella again steps up to play the role of peacemaker, but is again shouted down, and a bit more ferociously this time, I might add. At this, Blossom, being the caring person that she is, steps in to defend Thunderella from the verbal onslaught, and eventually manages to calm Muddy and Marina down enough to get them to understand what they need to learn. Muddy, of course, learns to not rush into things without thinking, because it generally doesn't work out well, and Marina learns that the dwarf elves are capable of handling themselves, and they're not the same crew that she was once with. Now, when they enter the cave, the princess asks Blossom what she meant about the crew that Marina was with, and Blossom tells her about how Marina once lost her crew at sea, and Marina blames herself because she thought she wasn't being assertive enough to save them, and now she's become a bit controlling as a result. Moonbeam distracts them by waking up and greeting everyone. She's fairly friendly and laid back, just like in the film. Heck, maybe we even keep this scene.
Ooh, good morning. A 1 and a 2 and a 3.
I suppose it could be a good build-up if nothing else. Anyway, they exit the cave and find a castle which is guarded by a huge fire-breathing dragon. The princess is of course terrified because why wouldn't she be, and she steps back, but Moonbeam steps forward, her face set. The great red fire-breathing dragon sends a jet of flame over the entire group, but it's deflected by a shield of moonlight. Moonbeam rolls up her sleeves and the dwarf elves begin to slowly step back as the full moon grows larger and turns blood red. Something that looks like the rings of Saturn begin forming on Moonbeam's raised palm. She hurls them like a frisbee at the dragon, severing one of its wings. The dwarf elves begin to book it in the opposite direction as Moonbeam pulls the constellations down from the sky and brings them to life. The princess screams that they can't leave Moonbeam behind, but the other dwarf elves say it's okay because Moonbeam is the strongest of them all. The princess takes one last look back at Moonbeam and sees a crescent bow forming in her hand as she knocks an arrow made of starlight. Our heroes get to the castle and make their way to the roof. The princess is slightly paranoid at encountering no one in the castle. I mean, shouldn't they have run into a guard at some point? They get to the roof and find Maliss, the Lord of Darkness, the man who is destroying the world and bringing an end to Mother Nature herself. They start talking with him and the princess asks, "How could you try and kill Mother Nature? How could you capture my dearly beloved? And look at what you've done to the land! Why won't you just please think of the children?" And then Maliss, the Lord of Darkness, creator of all that is unholy and evil, turns out to be just another ordinary guy. Taking over kingdoms is his day job. He just does it to make sure his mom doesn't yell at him for being a slacker. In fact, his real hobbies are knitting and comparing loafers. I mean, look at his! They're brilliant! However, sadly for this poor Joe, the blood moon has driven him insane, and he cackles madly, holding the prince up by his collar and declares that his loafers are superior, and it gives him the right, no, the duty to rule. And the princess is like, what the f? Censored. And Lord Maliss, in the same insane way, describes his plan with a monologue. "Well, my dear, I'm a simple man, but I know what I wants and I goes after it. And unlike Mother Nature and yourself, I am not a slacker. And maybe once Mother sees what I've done with the place, she'll finally realize I'm worth far more than my older brother, the accountant. Let's see him do all this with numbers, huh? Oh, I can see her reaction now."
You like what I've done with the place?
No! 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 No!
But as for you, my prince, he made fun of my loafers, so as for punishment, I order him to wear my loafers and admit that they are in fact superior. But he didn't! But you haven't even given me the loafers. Silence! You betrayed me for the last time, and so I shall marry your princess! And the princess is like, "I'll never marry you! You won't have a choice, dearie!"
What? Too much?
A bit.
Yeah, alright.
Oh, I got it! When we get up to the roof, we find Maliss holding a glass of wine. The prince is unconscious at his feet. Maliss has sort of a calm assurance about him, and the princess is confused and asks him, why is he holding a glass of wine? He responds that it's because he's about to be a king, so he read up on a book of manners, and he offers the princess some wine, and both are momentarily confused, the princess at his offer, and Maliss at her refusal. The princess asks, weren't we supposed to be battling each other to the death right now? I mean, what with you capturing my fiancé and almost killing Mother Nature? And Maliss responds with the, Mother Nature? Come on, princess. Mother Nature may be slacking off, but the pleasantries still need to be observed, kind of answer. He pulls out this ridiculously oversized book and begins quoting from
page 394.
Mother Nature is not slacking off!
Fine, I'll do it right, I'll be serious.
So Maliss is in reality an intelligent and arrogant individual, and he holds the prince aloft as he engages in the oldest and noblest of villain traditions, the monologue. He monologues about his evil plans to rule 2 kingdoms. He'll rule the prince's kingdom with a law that he helped put in place by manipulating the prince's father before his death. This law states that in the event of the king's death, assuming there was no living heir to the throne, Maliss would be given the crown. It's kind of similar to Jafar's plan from Aladdin, because again, we're totally not stealing from Disney. And the princess's kingdom, Maliss will rule by marrying her. As he finishes, he reveals that he was just buying time for his minions to surround them. Marina shoots his harpoon at Maliss, and he drops the prince in order to block the harpoon with his powers of darkness. The harpoon doesn't even scratch him, of course. Maliss sneers and everything goes black as darkness floods out from his cloak to cover the world. Maliss's voice seems to come from everywhere to taunt them. They were foolish to come into his lair in the land of doom, he says. Sunburn tries to light up the area but fails, and Maliss laughs at her pathetic efforts, demoralizing her even further. The princess feels a breeze and realizes that he's taken Blossom. She calls out for her and there's a scream, but nothing more. Marina realizes that Blossom is in real danger, but she manages to remain calm and uses her sensitive hearing to locate Maliss and shoot him through the darkness. She then rallies the others, using notably different language than she had in her previous orders, and successfully brings them together as a unit. Together, they quickly come up with a plan, and Marina directs everyone into position. Marina uses her hearing to help Sunburn locate Maliss, and they light him on fire. This shows Marina has learned to be a better leader, and Sunburn has gained greater control over her powers, even when under duress. This also brings some light into the area and allows Critterina to locate the Hellhound minions that she immediately starts negotiating with, convincing them to attack Maliss instead of her. Again, this shows that she's come a long way from the lady who didn't take things very seriously in their first encounter and would throw memes at trolls, not realizing how it could affect her friends. Or probably the viewing audience. Sorry about that. Meanwhile, Maliss manages to put out the fire and everything once again goes black, but this time we hear a bunch of growling dogs running past our group of heroes, and then a scream of pain mixed with terror off in the distance. Marina asks Thunderella to quickly go and find Blossom while Maliss is fighting with the Hellhounds. Flashes of light are appearing in random spots as Maliss's concentration slips while fighting off the Hellhounds. We hear yelps and whines coming from the Hellhounds as Maliss tosses them to the side. The world momentarily goes black again until a bright white light pierces the darkness. Everyone turns around and sees that Moonbeam has reappeared. Sunburn begins hurling fireballs at Maliss as Blossom, recently found by Thunderella, begins creating vine traps for Maliss to fight through, and Muddy confronts him directly. Her waiting to do this for the right moment shows a newfound patience in her. And they battle at a near standstill for a little bit until Maliss throws a Spear of Darkness at Muddy, who dodges, and it hits Thunderella. This momentarily distracts the group as Marina calls out for Thunderella and begins to run to see if she's okay. But Maliss surrounds all of our heroes, except for Thunderella, in a grip of his darkness and begins to laugh maniacally, again saying that they were foolish to challenge him where he is most powerful. Unnoticed by him, though, Thunderella has come to and is looking extremely angry. She rolls up her sleeves, her face set, and screams, "Hey, Maliss!" Maliss turns to face her. "Oh, look! I've angered the little one! Isn't she cute?" Maliss replies as rage boils up on Thunderella's face and she responds, "Take this, motherfucker." Censored. And lets out a scream as a giant bolt of lightning strikes Maliss from above. The castle beneath him crumbles into the nearby sea, taking Maliss with it, a look of shock still on his dead and blackened face. The dwarf elves, now released from Maliss's grip, are all staring dumbstruck at Thunderella. She breathes hard for a few moments and then stares back at them. "I told you my powers were scary," she finally says. They chuckle nervously, which then ascends into far greater laughter after a few seconds. They all gather Thunderella in their arms and have a big group hug. The princess goes to check on the prince, and he wakes up and is okay. They kiss, and we cut back to their wedding where Mother Nature and the dwarf elves are gathered in their seats cheering. The world is bright and green and happy again. Roll credits. So that was Happily Ever After, Hollywood's fixer-upper style. I think that this movie, while it was extremely different from the original film, would have actually been a much stronger fantasy adventure flick that may have even prevented the filmmakers from going out of business, at least for a little while. It gives us more memorable and satisfying characters, except for maybe the prince and the princess, but like I said at the beginning, I don't think that they should have been the main focus of the movie, from a character standpoint. It also avoids the legal troubles that they obviously knew were going to happen.
I mean, come on. When your movie was going to be known as Snow White and the Land of...
Stop! You've said it 6 times. Don't say it a 7th.
You counted?
Yes!
That's just sad. So as I was saying, Snow White and the Land of Doom...
No! You said it! You said Doom! Ah, crap, now I said it!
Oh, come on, Eric. There's nothing to worry. About. Eric? Eric? You're my ride.
I'm not going to be a horror extra!
Okay. Well,
Censored.